We're in the Louvre, and we're looking at an early Greek sculpture. It's really more of a figurine, only about 2 feet tall, often referred to as the Lady of Auxerre. And that's because it was discovered in a storeroom in the Museum in Auxerre early in the 20th century.
It was made likely on the island of Crete, and we can tell that from the limestone that it was made from, and also the similarities to other funerary statues that were found on Crete. So we think it might have been placed in an acropolis. And in some ways, it looks Egyptian.
Well, this was a moment when the Greeks are just beginning their own artistic tradition and were very far away from the naturalism of the 4th and 5th centuries. This is a period when Egypt is, in fact, an important source.
And we also see the influence of ancient Near Eastern sculpture in terms of the geometric pattern that we see on her skirt and also the geometric patterning of her hair.
In fact, the entire figure is not naturalistic at all. There's a patterning even of the forms of the body, so that it's not so much a carefully rendered forearm, for instance, or hand that has been seen from a model and then sculpted, so much as a series of almost symbolic forms that represent a hand.
It's interesting because this is the renewal of stone sculpture in Greece in the 7th century, and we have those geometric forms, elongated legs and elongated fingers as well.
Also, the hair is bundled up into those wonderful squares, perhaps referencing braids. And of course, there's a complete jumble in terms of the proportion of the head to the torso, to the hips, to the rest of the legs. But that's not its concern at all.
No.
This is a representation using a very strict geometric structure.
Interestingly, the arms are somewhat separated from the bodies, unlike what we see often in ancient Egyptian art, where the arms are really wedded to the body with stone in between. But her legs are a block of limestone and not separated at all, and she seems very weighted to that small base that she's on.
So it's very seductive, the idea of reading her with full knowledge of what happens in Greek art after this, and saying that that stone that has been carved away, freeing her arm, is in a sense a first step towards the wonderfully autonomous sculpture that will characterize Greek art several centuries forward. But of course, the person who made this didn't know that.
And also, I think it's important to remember that although we're not sure specifically of this sculpture's context, a lot of archaic sculpture was made as funerary sculpture.
Right, absolutely.
And so it's important to remember that religious context for these figures, even though we view them in a museum environment.
I think it's probably worth pointing out that those geometric patterns that we see incised on the surface of the sculpture were probably very brightly painted at one point.